Here, I'm live. I'm late. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Oh, I was desperately trying to find a spreadsheet because I always like to share spreadsheets with you all. I'm now scrolling through Twitter like there's no tomorrow. Yeah, I always like to find spreadsheets to share with you, but I can't really find the spreadsheet that I use for this. God knows where I've put it. Normally I'm much more organised, but it's gone missing, which is fine. It's not going to be a problem for the episode. I'm just using my normal "We Are Live for Railnatter" tweet, which is fine. I put that there. No, I don't want to have Twitter blue. God, why have they put that there? They've moved it again. Pin. Good. Close. Oh my goodness. So, hello everyone. Oh, so many. Yes, me getting stuck. Happy National Apprenticeship Week to all my fellow apprentices within transport. Or should that be...
Me say Happy National Apprenticeship Week to all my fellow apprentices within transport. Cookie.
That was from Cookie Monster. Thank you, Cookie Monster. Always good to have updates. Hello, yes, good, marvellous. Yeah, sadly, hello, Katie. Hello, first time you've made it to live stream in ages. Hello, everyone. Oh, this is a bit of a calamity, wasn't it, in me being late? Also, I'm sad that I can't share spreadsheets with you, but I can share hastily assembled maps with you. But more about that. Look, if you want to see, look, there's some maps. And we can hide those layers because we don't need those. What we do want to do is probably actually what's all? Oh yeah, probably I want to pop existing network in there. It's probably what I want to do, isn't it? Yeah, just pop that up there. So we've got the existing network, and we've got some quite hard to spot because Google Earth is actually a rubbish tool, and I should learn how to use QGIS. Because visualizing the things that I want to visualize on here is not so straightforward. Because as you can see, there are some dots here, but they're very difficult to spot. Look, there's one. There's a dot. There's a dot, and it's in the middle of that there London town. So fine, there is a dot. We'll come back to that dot. No, it wasn't. That wasn't Yoda. No. Adam Evans wants me to get Mapmen on. Yeah, right. Okay. So without further ado, let us. By which I mean me. Check that I have in fact got the approval. Oh no! In fact, the first thing I need to do is this episode, of course, brought to you by the Class 152, of which Jack Elliott. No one likes the Cookie Monster impersonation. Okay, that's fine. Sorry, everyone. Don't even stop me. You better believe that voices are going to be part of one or more of the pre-records for upcoming Pat Leave. Anyway, more on that later. Right, here, this is clearly not the 152 in your minds never existed. However, you can see that there is in front of you, in fact, a Class 156 in a partly demolished original Oban station before they turned Oban station into just an absolutely dismal horror show. One of many stupid regional railway decisions. In Scotland, particularly. So, here is a 156. Now, cash-strapped regional railways did, in fact, have a plan, much like the 155s, to split the 156s in half into one-car units that were cheaper to run, in theory, although by a trivial amount, frankly. Bearing in mind how relatively cheap a two-car 156 is to run, splitting it in half isn't that much cheaper. Splitting it in half and calling them Class 152s, which is bonkers. The plan was to split the dang thing in half and call it a Class 152. So, there you are, Class 152 for episode 152. I didn't close the door behind me. Oh, and also, that is on. Good. You can't see me anyway. Fine, marvellous. Right, anyway, I'm waffling. So, there we are, Class 152. Without further ado, while I catch my breath and work out what the hell's going on, welcome to tonight's Rail Natter. And as the intercity 225 fades away, we have to first, before we begin on our mapping odyssey, we have to talk about the news. First of all, we need to talk about taking Bradshaw's name in vain, because Mark Harper, the Secretary of State for Transport, today, as of recording, gave a speech kind of reigniting the fire under the boiling pot that is British Rail 2, as he was at pains to say that it wasn't. So it's a long rambling speech that you can find the link to, and it for a lot of words it says remarkably little. One thing that's good about it, at least something's happening. Fine, my goodness. What isn't so great is that there is a lot of politics going on. As you can see in this screenshot of 3 paragraphs apart from each other, we have this is not going to be Network Rail 2.0 nor a return to British Rail. Taking politics out of the railways is the only way to build a truly commercially led industry. Wait, what? Commercially led industry? So there's nonsense in there. There's stuff about him wanting more roads, all that sort of good stuff. But if I highlight taking politics out of the railways, as you'll see, only a paragraph later, political content removed. So yeah, Mark Harper is a very hostile player in the world of transport. He is fixated on spending more on roads. He is absolutely fixated on the idea of low passenger numbers, and he keeps referring to small numbers of, small percentage of journeys, when he's very tactically not referring to distance travelled, which is where you're, when idiots talk about 1% mode share, then it's not 1% mode share. It's 1% of journeys representing about 10% of passenger miles travelled, or ton miles travelled. So it's nonsense, and obviously we should be making that number go up. So yeah, there's a lot of problems, and he consistently misdiagnoses the problem, and says, we need to talk about all of the wonderful private investment that's come into the railways since privatisation. Nope. That private investment looks like private investment, except that it's at tremendous cost to fair-in taxpayers, because they have to pay for it at a much higher return rate. Otherwise, the private companies wouldn't do it. They have to pay for it at a much higher return rate than if government had borrowed to pay for that stuff in the first place. Also, things like not making it Network Rail 2.0. Network Rail is the organisation that you should be taking and expanding and changing the name of, not creating a new organisation, because Network Rail has all the people in place that you need to do all this stuff. So why on earth will you create a new organisation and shed all the pain of losing staff from yet another reshuffle? Keep Network Rail, rename it to British Rail. Yeah, problems. And of course, this fixation with keeping private companies involved, even though there will be absolutely no space for them to do anything of any value other than just a reason to just give them a fee every year for no reason. It just makes no sense. Anyway, so news number 1, news number 2, high speed nothing. Not much to say on this. The reality is that all of this HS2 stuff is speculation. I'm sure some of you have been seeing it in the news. The pain is all of this discussion is irritating nonsense that is representative of real discussions that are happening. So whilst the Telegraph's ridiculous speculation of halving the number of trains to 6 trains an hour over HS2 is them taking a punt / just relying on a Tony Barclay letter, I think, it does represent some of the stupid discussions that are happening within government that are worth kind of becoming increasingly angry about. And I have to say, I'm getting exhausted by it because, oh my goodness, just... They should never have altered the Euston Plan. Delivering it as a one-hit wonder was always going to become very expensive, very challenging, and then ultimately delay until the line can open. You could, a staged approach would have meant you could have opened it for the initial Phase 1 services far earlier than building the whole damn thing in one go. Just a very, very stupid manoeuvre. Doug Oakley has a lot to answer for on that front, I'm afraid. But yeah, it's actually HS2 is still happening. It's actually very exciting. We should all be excited by it, but this constant news is very frustrating. Anyway, we must, I say, jump forwards to talk about the Big Four. We have to talk about these 4 railway companies. Hello, everyone. Hi. Victoria Aomori says corporate restructuring means only has only one intended outcome. You know what I mean? Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, it's been a bit of a day. Anyone following me on Twitter today will realise that I've been doing kind of dismal shenanigans all over the place, attempting to get to my job in Manchester and then come back. It's hard work. Yes. Yeah, I did pop up on TLDR News. The mixed feelings on the overall. To be honest, the overall piece was kind of basically fine. And they did give me plenty of time to kind of say my piece, so I can't really begrudge them it. It was not an unreasonable summary. Anyway, here we are. The Big Four. The LMS, LNER, GWR, and Southern Railways. In 1923, these railways were created. And this was, not necessarily a dreadful idea. It was kind of happening anyway. There were some negative side effects. One of the negative side effects is that a rolling program of northern electrification, both on the east coast and kind of in the northeast and the northwest of Britain, was canned off. The LMS were incredibly hostile to, the LMS board was incredibly hostile to electrification. They didn't care for it, and so they sacked Henry O'Brien and his boss, the chief mechanical engineer of the LNY, the Lancashire and Yorkshire, because both of them put up a fuss and a fight saying, no, you need to electrify the West Coast Main Line. You need what is now the West Coast Main Line. You need to electrify more, just electrify more. And they vigorously, they were sacked for it, which you can all read about in this fine book here. Henry Owen O'Brien, this book here, well worth a read if you can get hold of it. Big face, you can get hold of it. Worth reading. It's all about it's all about this guy, but within it is some important stuff about the history of electrification in int UK. A worthy read. Anyway, right, let me slide that back in there. Fine, in pride of place next to Simon Bradley's Railways. So let me continue on these. So another side effect of the grouping is that essentially you had some quite substantial bits of railway awkwardly grouped in to, for example, the Great Central Railway is a good example, grouped into the LMS, and therefore never really cared for or found very interesting and not seen as a priority. Another challenge with these is that when eventually you get British Rail forming, which I should have put a slide in for, when British Rail forms, when you get nationalisation, or British Railways as it was, you get nationalisation in 1948. Essentially, you retain this very entrenched tribalism of the big four. The consequence of that being, rather than taking a proper strategic look at what Britain's intercity rail network should have looked like, at the time thinking about where express trains would have gone, on which the trunk routes that should have been kind of enhanced, expanded, and so on. For example, modernisation looked at the West Coast Main Line, but actually the West Coast Main Line was the mainline railway of the London, Midland and Scottish. It wasn't the strategic route that could have provided, the ideal strategic linking up Britain's main cities. And so I kind of thought, as part of some prep work, sorry, Kevin Tennant, you're right, Great Central was grouped into the LNER. Thank you. This is why Kevin is here, to keep me right. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks everyone else who's keeping me right on the facts. You can keep me right on the facts. Yes, of course it was the LNER. Of course it was. Which makes even less sense. Just bizarre. Anyway, the consequence of these entrenched behaviours of what were the boards of these companies basically becoming the management structure within British Railways was that they retained pretty much retained that view of our railway, our main line. And the consequence of that was also that, and in fact, when the Conservatives got back in again, in, what was it, 51, 53? Anyway, when Churchill got back in and then the Conservatives got back in, they intended, there were big leaps, and actually you can read quite nicely about this in David Lawrence's British Rail Design, which is also a very good book, which I recommend you reading. Yeah, British Rail Design, it's gorgeous, got loads of gorgeous stuff in it. If I open a picture, let's open a page. Let me open a page that looks nice, because you can look at things like some of this stuff here. Yeah, in fact, this is the page that makes my case for me. This page here shows you some of the designs, particularly the bits here, that were intended for. Also, look at that italic. That's such like 50s, 60s vibes Britain. British Rail was kind of, rather than going into more centralisation, the Conservatives looked at essentially almost splitting it back into the big four again, if not kind of legally, then kind of by branding and by management style. So, again, entrenching some of these sort of non-strategic behaviors. And the consequence of that is that we didn't ever look at the network. I mean, there are lots of other consequences in terms of operations and but we're looking at the network and the infrastructure and the express infrastructure at the moment. There was no strategic look taken at Britain's railway infrastructure. So, for example, the LNER retained what is a really insensible, it just doesn't make sense for there to be basically a direct straight line from York to London in terms of the rail network. Yes, it means you get good journey times for coming down from Edinburgh on that side via York, and yes, it's a fantastic popular rail. But in reality, could we have actually used the infrastructure that we had better to create a better shape of network? And it got me thinking. Right, okay. Let's think about the cities that are annoyingly about not having the spreadsheet, as I can't show you the list of different cities that fall into the different categories. But let us think about 3 tiers of big town / city. Let's call them cities. 3 tiers of city in GB. So Ireland, Northern Ireland, putting you into one side. I'm looking at the big island of Great Britain, England, Wales, Scotland. It's 3 tiers of city. Tier A cities that are 1 million plus people now. So obviously, there's kind of marginally. The point of this exercise was originally thinking about strategic stuff for another episode, but it got me thinking about this, and I thought I'd do this halfway episode to kind of make the point. So this is city populations now, but the reality is that relatively the city, these pools of cities, relatively speaking, would still have some level of priority relative to the population of Britain back in the late 40s, early 50s. So, Tier A, 1 million plus people. Tier B, 0.5 to 1 million people. So, like 500,000 to 1 million people. And Tier C, 100,000 to 500,000 people. So, you've got Tier A, Tier B, Tier C, right? So, yes, my spreadsheet, I don't know where it is. It's got lost somewhere in the great hard drive ether somewhere. I don't know where it is. It's hiding somewhere in Dropbox, or worse, hiding in my work laptop, not on Dropbox, which is irritating. Anywho, so from this, Marvin TP Android has the Crayolas at work, and we're going to do it. We're going to do it. Absolutely smash the like button. So let's get back to this. Let's get back to our map. So we're going to start with we have here the there's GB. There it is. And you can see today's railway network, not the original full railway network, today's railway network, mostly because it hasn't loaded up there for some reason. You can see it there, hopefully fairly clearly. Yeah, that's reasonably clear. I know that green isn't an ideal colour, and actually, do I have a way to filter it? No, I don't, do I? Because of my delayed trains, I've had far less time than I'd have liked to. Oh, style template. I wonder if this could work. I wonder if this is a thing. If I could grayscale it, that'd be really nice. No, I don't even know where that dialog box has just literally disappeared. Never to be seen again. We'll never know. Anyway, marvellous. So if I click on Tier A, we can see the cities that are Tier A cities. So we have London. We have, in terms of these are the big conurbations. Greater London. West Midlands, so like Brum. Actually, I'll just call them by the main city name, but you get the sort of city area around it. So Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds, and then the only other one after that is Glasgow. So you can see that the main, again, this is in theory why it makes sense for, I don't know why it's hiding the stuff up there. I presume there's just a data limit. Google Earth has got really bad, Google, all your products are crap. Chuck your stupid AI nonsense in the bin, spend the research and development on that, on the products that you currently have that you've made dreadful, like your search engine and Google Earth. So the black lines there are the existing network, right? Hopefully reasonably clear. Right, fine. So, by the way, when I'm talking intercity, forget branding. I'm just talking about the literal meaning of the word intercity, as in between cities, right? So forget the branding, forget provincial railways, forget regional railways, forget intercity. Just think actual, what at the time were the expresses between major centres, right? Jay's Transport, I swear only Birmingham and London have over 1 million population. Only way Leeds does. So this is looking at metropolitan populations. But the West Yorkshire population currently is over 1 million. The Greater Manchester population is over 1 million, and the Merseyside population is over 1 million, as is Glasgow's. So this is looking at metropolitan built-up area populations as well. So it's not just looking at the town in the middle; it's looking at the wider area. So, anywho, so we've got those, and if I don't know, if is it clearer if I get rid of the if I do that? It literally isn't. Actually, it's clearer with the things on it. So, what would a network look like? Thinking about the network that BR had in 1950. Let's just say in 1950, the network that BR had. Actually, ish. Some of these bits might have been canned off before that. But anyway, including all the stuff that is no longer a railway. Manchester Borough is not a useful boundary yet. Ideally, I'd have used, and I haven't because the data's not been finalised yet, I'd have used travel to work areas for these city populations. Because travel to work areas, I think, are probably the best measures of population relevant to the nearest centre, certainly for public transport use. Hi Deirdre, sadly the spreadsheet died, or I've lost it somewhere, so I'm going to have to recreate it and repeat the process. But I'll explain about yeah, just going to have to do it off my brain. So, what does the network look like to deliver just the Tier A network? So that's the network between the million plus centres. If Google is not liking this, shall I just switch off the existing network? There we go, that's going to make things smoother. Okay, fine, I'll switch off the existing network. So, before I do that though, actually, it's maybe worth just thinking, what does the current intercity network look like? So this is the current intercity network, mostly. I think there may be some weird gaps that I've missed off. This is a kind of a work in progress for a future episode, but Deirdre says that the latest travel to work areas will be absolutely crap, so I should probably use the 2011 travel to work areas. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Chris Jackson is also pointing out, yes, fine. Right, okay, lots of interesting discussion. Chris Jackson saying travel to work areas are extended outwards by house price differential, hence the rise in long distance commuting. Anyway, this is the existing intercity network, and it's the kind of services that nominally are intercity and run at the moment, and you're kind of like, okay, that seems fairly comprehensive, fine. But actually, you could argue there's quite a lot of duplication there. And actually, if you kind of add, particularly if we look at the Tier B and Tier C cities, firstly, you'll notice that a lot of cities are missing from that collection. Oh look, Belfast is in there. A lot of cities are missing from that collection, of our current intercity network. Even if I switch Tier C off, you can see that like the Tier B cities are served, but like it's not hugely logical. It's particularly if you think about some of the areas that really ought to be kind of getting connected onto that network. Not so good. Mansfield being an example of a pretty large conurbation that's not included. So you can see that kind of, I'm not convinced that our current intercity network makes a huge amount of sense. So if we hide that existing network and just have a look at what I think a Tier A network would look like, you will notice. So actually, I'm going to keep the other intercity network on underneath. This is me, basically, the way I've generated this is by drawing straight lines between each of those nodes and mapping onto what the bit of railway that closely follows the straight line, but ties up all the nodes. Also, what I've done is think about a network that allows you to get from reasonably efficiently from every node to every other node directly with a direct service of some kind. So, yeah, people are saying North Wales should have been part of that, the existing network. You're right, it should have been. Yes, sorry, thank you. As I said, this is rough and ready, so do call me out in the chat for the things that, like, this is not science, it's crayons, for us to experiment thoughtfully. Yes, you're right. However I draw the line, it's going to be arbitrary. So, this is me thinking. This is essentially me recreating what in future you would emulate then with a high-speed rail network, right? So going up to Glasgow, via Manchester, Liverpool, and Leeds, and this is what I think the best way to have built and then enhanced the network would have looked like. And I've always been irritated by the fact that the West Coast Main Line goes neither to Liverpool nor to Manchester. I've always thought that was really actually not very good at all. Because you might say, well, it allows you to, you can't choose between Liverpool and Manchester. Yeah, I think in this situation it would be better to actually have because the result is a very south-facing, London-facing network, because it means that you get the worst-case scenario for if you're in Manchester wanting to go north, the network isn't very good and isn't hugely well enhanced. So I thought, well, okay, what would the network have looked like if we had gone for straight line, kind of from London up to the West Midlands, and then from the West Midlands up to Scotland, up to Glasgow, and then tying Leeds and Manchester and Leeds and Liverpool up to Manchester. Well, one of the things I reckon is that strategically you would not have just retained the you would not have used and retained the West Coast Main Line coming out of Euston, which would have freed up to become a bit more of a commuter line. What you should have done is actually at this point used the Midland Main Line. So use the Midland Main Line up until you get to here. Where you get up to I think this is Luton, isn't it? Yeah, this will be Luton, where there is a former bit of railway line that in a reasonably straight line connects you across. And by the way, there are lots of kinks that you get from this that from the 1950s onwards BR could have and in our wonderful alternative universe should have worked out, let's say, work those kinks out, ease those kinks. But this bit of railway, which someone in the chat, some nerd in the chat will be able to tell me exactly what this bit of railway was, is if I press people are getting upset at the idea. This isn't retroactive. So things like the Castlefield corridor shouldn't have been a problem because you'd have done other things to alleviate them, to kind of prioritise, deprioritise, blah blah blah. You'd have upgraded the route, the corridor, to make sure it was a mainline standard. You can see here this connection would then go from the Midland Main Line and then connect you across to the West Coast Main Line, then through Birmingham, and that would have been the prioritised route and should have been upgraded accordingly. So ideally you'd have had 4 tracks for most of it, and certainly coming between London and Manchester, most of it would be 4 track. But actually that means that you'd be having kind of your intercity hub would be at King's Cross St Pancras there. So fine, take note of that, everyone. Put that in your copybook. So if I switch off existing, what other bits? So the existing network, you can see I've tried to make the middle line is the network that still exists now. The thin bits of line are bits of railway that are now gone, and there are some thick bits which I've added that you need to facilitate. And actually, you don't need much to facilitate this, other than if you go into Manchester, you can see around Manchester there's quite a lot. And the reason I put all this as being part of the route is in a bit more of a European style. Having a loop in the city means that you can have trains that don't do any turnbacks. Essentially, you avoid turnbacks. So, for example, if you're going from Liverpool to Glasgow, you'd go up through here, Castlefield corridor, and then up round the back. So you go through there and up round the back. And yes, Piccadilly would be substantially enhanced as a through station, not as a terminal station. So you'd have done other stuff here. You'd have done pretty substantial remodelling work to this. So you do that. Round you go. And then people saying the former Lenborough connector. Sarcasm. Thanks, Mike Osted. Very good. Why use the Midland Main Line and not the West Coast Main Line to exit London? You'll see momentarily when we get to the Tier B network. Yes, so the new bit you would need is if you were going from London to Leeds, you'd go through Piccadilly and then round what is now the Ordsall Cord and didn't exist, in the 50s, and then through Victoria and round the top to get. So this is just suggesting if you wanted to have a single efficient network, not West Coast, East Coast, but just a single network that you'd then plough cash into. This is one way you could do it and have kind of that single network. And then, as you say, you'd then spend money on building diversions and straightenings and potentially high speed kind of avoiding lines and stuff to kind of improve that. And likewise, you see, you take the Liverpool route, you'd not go over the top. You'd go through Warrington because, as we'll point out momentarily, a little bit of thought has gone into providing an optimization of these routes with the Tier B cities. So. Oh, you can't see the mouse. Sorry. Yes. Thank you. Capture cursor. Done. Now you can see the mouse. Sorry about that. Thank you. Do shout. Michael C. And everyone who's shouting at me about the mouse. I've put the mouse up. You can see the mouse. So, Yeah. So if I go in here, you can see you've got this kind of the loop, and this also. So there you go. So also what you have there is a need for a better route out of Manchester as well. It kind of shows part of the reason for this, by the way, is kind of, I think the number one reason this becomes interesting is less actually about this weird fictional alternative past history that I'm talking about. It's more showing how rubbish the British rail network is because of its lack of strategic oversight when it was built. Because some of the alignments are some of it makes no sense. There is no particularly good north-facing route from Manchester northwards. There are some strange strategic choices here there. What else? So that's that, and then you go up to Glasgow. And actually, I also think the West Coast Main Line takes the route through like takes a different route that I would take. I can't exactly remember why. I think it's because of improved curvature actually that I chose to take a slightly the alternative route than the current one. Anyway, so then you go into Central. Fine, right. So that's fairly straightforward, and also kind of doesn't say very much. What I think gets more interesting is when you bring the Tier B stuff in. So first of all, let's switch that off, and let's look at what the Tier B cities are. So the Tier B cities include the Hampshire sort of conurbation, South Hampshire conurbation. So that's like Portsmouth, Southampton, Bristol, Cardiff, kind of Cardiff, Newport as a built-up area. You've got Leicester, Nottingham. Where else are we? You also have Newcastle, kind of Tyne and Wear, and then Edinburgh is kind of into the mix. Now, it's not that many places. It's not a huge, long list of places, but it does give you a more complex network and how you then deliver that with services. Is this now or... Kevin Tennant's asking, is this now or 1923? So we're kind of talking about what... So this weird hybrid alternative history I'm talking about is what if we didn't have the siloed thinking of grouping in 1950 when we had in 1948 when nationalisation happened as part could the network have looked different if we'd had more of a strategic look at the network and at how we could have prioritised routes, for example, for electrification priority or capacity enhancement work or just general investment in tidying up alignments, that sort of stuff. So it's a bit of this is a thought experiment, but mostly again it's exposing kind of how messy the rail network kind of is that we have now. This is it's just I've got the crayons out and we're having some fun to see what things look like. So let's get our Tier A routes back, but let's now add in our Tier B intercity routes. Right within that, you can see. We start getting this. So if you can sort of see, we start getting this sort of figure of eight shape, right? So you start getting this figure of eights, and the point of this is again, it's ensuring that each one of the nodes on these lists can reach each one of the other nodes with a direct service. So on my lovely spreadsheet, which I've lost somewhere, I had a series of services that connect. I was providing the minimum number of services that would connect as many places with direct that would connect every node with every other node with a direct service. I really want to find that spreadsheet now. I'll find it. I'll post it. I'll put a link on Twitter. Now let us zoom in and see what this looks like. So first of all, as an interesting point here, I in my psychopathy would not use Paddington. I would run the West Coast Main Line, and yes, the existing alignment's a bit kinky here and there, but I would make the most of some of this railway land to smooth some of those kinks out, and actually provide a correct connection across. And again, North London line's a bit messy. Potentially, you could provide the connection across into a substantially enlarged King's Cross St Pancras station area. So you get some of those services actually, and you kind of minimizing the number of big intercity hubs, particularly, and also key thing, getting rid of some of those annoying connections that happen between Paddington and going northwards. So, yeah, that would be the route that the intercity services would take. But then, by and large, Great Western Main Line, fine. I'd ignore the Badminton line, so I'd use the old route, which would require enhancement, and make the most of the 1950s to just do some more heavy going stuff in Bath before everything gets listed to high hell. People are saying, have I missed off a Tier B city in the southeast? There's a purple dot with no connection. Have I? Where am I? No, sorry. This was me putting a dot here, thinking about which I've forgotten to delete for this episode, which is thinking about connections to Europe. So yeah, no, yes and no. For now, I'm just thinking internally, but yeah, I suppose you'd think about that connection down to get to Europe if the Channel Tunnel existed. Good spot, by the way, very good spot. Four level King's Cross St Pancras. Well, yeah, actually, it could be, yeah. So, there we go. A London Hauptbahnhof, if you will. Yeah, exactly. Kind of that. And the other thing, of course, is in this magical world that we're talking about, you'd have built the through station to get to Eurostar, to get to the tunnel. Sorry, that Corbyn didn't want unblocked. It wasn't just Corbs. Go back to the HS1 HS2 link episode to get what I'm talking about. Anyway, so fine. But the other thing which I think you'd then upgrade is upgrading what looks like a weird route, because you wouldn't use this route to get directly from London. I mean, you could, because it could be cheap, but you might be, you could use it to have cheaper tickets. But the route that goes from London, and you'd enhance this far better than it has now. You'd get rid of third rail, overhead electrification, do it properly. You'd go from, by the way, if people are going, oh, you're saying existing upgrades instead of doing high-speed lines. No, I'm kind of saying this is where you do parallel. Like, if we had an alternative universe where you'd done more investment in some of these routes, it might have delayed the need for high-speed upgrades, or we could have done a more European style. Well, we build bits of it with high-speed sections and stuff. But no, this is not me saying. This is not like me saying what the network should look like now. This is a thought piece looking at how non-strategic our rail network actually is. But, and again, like look at this mess. This wibbly mess is like, it doesn't look very intercity. And yes, your journey times would be, not ideal. But again, it's part of, you take that strategic view and you go, right, okay, so if we want to improve journey times, we have to spend some money and sort some alignments out here and there. But what I'd say is that you do this route down to Southampton and back up to Bristol, and then you'd use, and rather than doing the kind of weird via Oxford thing for cross-country services going to Southampton, they'd all go via Bristol, which, and also if you're going to Cardiff, you'd go via Bristol again. So it's trying to, so yes, again, that would extend journey times. Yes, I know about all the journey time stuff, but I'm trying to think, if you did some of the enhancement, putting journey times to one side, if you did some of these enhancements, you could have a simpler service that you could then run more frequently. You'd actually increase frequencies, So, so your generalized journey time would decrease, even if your overall journey time, your like end-to-end speed journey time wouldn't. And again, a bit like Manchester, I'd make use of, firstly, some existing infrastructure loops to provide this sort of, the sort of ability to go in each direction. So, say you're going from London to Cardiff, you'd come up, kind of go through along a new chord, which I'd propose they'd have to build. So you'd come off the Brunel's route through Temple Meads, and then up to, and I know you can go through Parkway, but Parkway is centre city is the value. You want to go through the centre. So you come off there through Temple Meads and up to the Severn Tunnel. Likewise, if you're going to so let's see, I'm trying to think. If you're going to I'm trying to think what the route was that involves doing this thing. What was it? That way and then there. There was a reason for it. I'm trying to think what it is. It might be just if you're turning around. If you're going down, so Birmingham, then round. I tested all these with my list of. Again, it's a lovely spreadsheet which I was hunting for and was why I was late. I can't find. But anyway, basically, you create this loop and it gives you the opportunity to make sure you're not doing any reversing, any turnbacks. All the kind of routes can be. All the journeys can be direct through routes. Actually, I think it might have been because. One of the services I think I had coming from. So I had Cardiff services coming down into Bristol. And looping around that way and then coming back out to go to Cardiff, which I know sounds bonkers, but again, I was doing a bit of a thought experiment of what would it look like if you were trying to minimize the number of different services. So you just have the same service, even though it runs back on itself. You run it as a higher frequency, you get a kind of a drum beat. Except I have a Brum Cardiff chord further up. I think that's because of... Oh, yeah, that is true. What's that one for, I wonder? Oh, possibly... Again, I'll do a follow-up and if I find the ruddy spreadsheet, I'll send it out to you and you can sort of see the logic. I think there were like 15 different services and all of them made sure that you connected all the different ones, but some of them involved certain types of journey. Yeah, there's a logic to it which I can't explain now because I lost my spreadsheet and my brain is mush because of all my train shenanigans. Also, again, a similar sort of story in. And again, this is where like you see this falls down because you're ending up hogging local services, like hogging where local services should be running to get this runaround, right? So again, if you've got Birmingham and you need to face in different directions, then you need to have again the same sort of loop. So you're kind of coming around one way or the other to provide the through, going through New Street. So there, and then running across to so you want to run across to Leicester, and you see how much of a mess some of these east-west connections are from the lack of strategy that we have in our network. And at this point, you'll notice something here, which is where's the East Coast Main Line? No East Coast Main Line. So in my suggested utopia, which would obviously hit me very hard because I like the East Coast Main Line, I like getting to London in less than 2 hours. However, I do think that's very silly in terms of making the most of infrastructure to connect up key points and actually maximizing that flow of trains to connect up places. So thinking less about, maximize journey time, long distance, and optimizing connecting as many large cities as possible so that if you're on a north-south service, the chances are any number of those cities that you need to get to will be connected by the same service. At this point then, you see that we're coming off here and connecting up through onto so you can see we've got our nice network going along here. Actually, what is it that I do here? Let me just check what I'm. So there's a connection up there onto. I've got all my place names switched off, so I'm trying to exactly remember what the connections through are. In any case, what a shoddy shout at me for the rail natter, everyone. LNAR Sheffield. Yeah, absolutely. LNAR would go through Sheffield. So you come along here, and yes, you are making use of Great Central Railway in a few places. Those few places being, okay, here's the kink at Loughborough, right, which you'd get rid of the kink at Loughborough. You'd make that the smooth, flat bit, right? And then you'd go from the middle of Main Line onto the Great Central to make use of the Great Central's better alignment through Nottingham. So through Leicester, at Loughborough, you'd come off onto the Great Central, through Nottingham, and then things get messy because you want to include Mansfield, which is a big chunk of population on the north-south route. But then you can see it goes a bit funny because there was because there's a huge number of railways around here, and a lot of them are almost all of them are completely useless for strategic passenger operations. But somehow you want to get across to Chesterfield. There's Chesterfield, and then you split up. Again, it's another kind of loop situation. If you were going then across to Manchester, you'd go around the Great Central Old route and then come back, and then go via. Interestingly, I've missed out the court there. That's a whoopsie. Across the Pennines, over Hope Valley, and by the way, yes, Hope Valley, not Woodhead. Woodhead's alignment is rubbish. Forget Woodhead. You're getting rid of Woodhead no matter what. Anyway, it's not been saved. We're using Hope. Connecting up through into Manchester that way. So that's your route there. Sheffield, obviously you need a Sheffield up to Leeds route that's more direct. So kind of chosen this route here, this weaving around route, which actually uses up bits of former alignment there to provide you a kind of a route that then connects you on. So again, there's a little bit of avoiding too much parallel route because so it kind of comes up there and connects in with a new a non-existing piece of infrastructure to give you a decent radius to then connect up and go up into Leeds and then fine. And then Leeds you can run as a through station because it kind of sort of is anyway. What else have we got? So what other curiosities can you spot? Everyone in the chat, Northampton and Lamport line is saying Paul Hooker-Royce, yeah, possibly. Chris Jackson, the Midland Counties link from Rugby to Leicester was the original East Coast Main Line and is high on my list of strategic missing links to put back. Yes, Chris, we will touch on that when we get to the Tier C network. So the other thing about the East Coast Main Line I think is important is, okay, you're making the use of the East Coast Main Line there, but forget the Durham connection, because sorry, Durham ain't as big and important as everything around the kind of the Tees conurbation of kind of Middlesbrough, Thornaby, sort of Stockton, this whole big lump here, kind of Middlesbrough and surrounding area. What I would propose is you kind of use the Yarm route as the main through route for the East Coast Main Line, but actually, kind of as I think should be the case now, really, comes up through into and would use a better alignment through the kind of the yards that you have. There's so much ex-industrial stuff around here, but would create a new alignment, including a new bridge across the Tees, to then connect up to bits of former railways, so that your route, because you could have used an existing route and kink it around, but I think marvelous BR, my magical alternative BR, would actually have built a new route to provide a connection to the centre of kind of, you know, you could put the station in Thornaby where there's loads of space and then connect in all directions, but basically providing kind of a route that is more central within the conurbation. But you could use the weird kinky mess that goes up through kind of this side of the city, and then again also things like this you could kind of probably have built given the industrial land and different land use choices, you could probably have like created a better alignment that avoided the weird kink, in Hartlepool it'll be, won't it? All right, shout at me if that's wrong. I think it is. And then you get the kink as you come up into Sunderland as well, and the alignment through Sunderland's a bit of a mess, and that's actually used by Metro services. And then as you get into Gateshead and Newcastle, you don't need a loop because services are just going north-south. But what you do end up doing is kind of coming the wrong way towards King Edward Bridge and then round that way. So you do end up with this weird sort of square shape to kind of get through Newcastle and head northwards. But the advantage of that is that you tie an enormous conurbation that is currently not on the main north-south network onto a better East Coast Main Line. So that's what I would do with the East Coast Main Line. Interestingly, Edinburgh-Glasgow, what would I have as the main Edinburgh-Glasgow link? Thank you, Sakura. It was indeed Hartlepool. Thank you. Yes. Stocktonia, as Raphael Nicolaus is saying. Why go with the route north of Manchester via Wigan rather than Bolton? We'll come back to that in a second. So the route I would pick as the better route between, as an intercity route between Edinburgh Glasgow is actually going via Shotts, the Shotts route, because actually once the mid-Calder lines are pretty fast. Once you come off the mid-Calder lines and run through kind of Livingston and along, the alignment's pretty good. So again, you could work out the kinks, but actually that alignment's pretty good. And the other advantage is then you get the intercity connection runs into Central, so you can consolidate intercity services in Central. So I've reminded myself why I picked going this way on the Tier A route is because then you avoid too much parallel duplication. You kind of make them meet up here. So that's why I picked that one. So yeah, rather than going via Falkirk, which is the current intercity route, you'd go via Shotts and South Livingston and kind of that route. And again, I think that would be a better intercity route and frankly a more direct one. But again, you can understand why the current intercity route goes that way because it goes via Falkirk and provides you the connections up to Stirling. So yes, this is, as I say, a bit of an exploratory thought piece. North of Newcastle, would you run via Blythe, Ashington rather than Morpeth? Interesting question. No, I'd probably just say that you're doing a Morpeth diversion, right? That's one way you could do it. What else have I? What other intrigue and stuff have I got going on? Yes, that loop is for. So yeah, in terms of duplication, that loop is a duplication. Interestingly, and that's for getting stuff going the right direction for some of those route options. But you can see some of the bits of railway required. You can also see some of the new bits required. Oh no, that's not one. There is. To be honest, most of it's kind of, if I switch off existing informer, and you can see. There aren't that many new bits required. There's that chord thing that I kind of pointed out, coming off the kind of coming off the Sheffield Manchester. What is that? Are those the TJCs? Are they the TJCs? And then facing northwards to, I think they are the TJCs, facing northwards to get into Leeds. That's a big bit of new stuff. And then obviously the thing up at Middlesbrough as well. That's the other two bits. So those are the two big chunks of new stuff. And then some of the stuff at Bristol as well. So that little chord thing in Bristol. But other than that, and there is a new bit which I think was my. Oh yeah, it was my. So this actually now exists, but it didn't then, which is building the chord to get you off the North London line and down into St Pancras for our intercity services. So that's that. So fine. Now everyone, what did the Woodhead line ever do to me? Red flag for people who are nostalgia driven, but also it's just a worse alignment. It's worse connected and it's a worse alignment than Hope Valley. Having just done Hope Valley, it's pretty decent alignment. Stick with it. So I like the fact that the history of Woodhead, first electrified main line, it just for me represents a lot of nostalgism that irritates me, and it's a bit like people who say reopen the Great Central without any real understanding of what the implications of that are. Kevin Tennant saying many times I've taken the Shotts slow boat to get to and from South Glasgow. Yeah, absolutely. Let me see. So, what other stories are going on here? Raphael's asking: intercity services strictly between the connected tiered cities, or also some few stops in between? No, I would have them only stop at the cities that fall into those categories. So then, if you wanted to travel to the intermediate cities, or any, well, not intermediate cities, but any intermediate stops. But I would have the services stopping at the tier A, B, or C things that they run, cities that they run through. So if you've got a tier A service, you might well, I suppose you could run a direct, but actually the reality is you might as well stop it at the intermediate. So there's, kind of TBC, I don't know. As I say, it's more of a thought piece and a bit of a mental experiment, this one. So the next bit is, what about the tier C cities? What about our yellow dots that we've got? And there are loads of them all over the place. And suddenly you can see that we're starting to bring in more of, quite a lot more of Britain. And indeed, you require kind of a much broader range of services to actually deliver and meet some of these spots. So then what are we going to do about what the network should look like at this point? Well, let me expand this and click this to show you what I think so these would be, they'd still be intercity, but they'd be the third tier intercity services. So, for example, let's stay in Scotland to start with. So the extra bits of network you'd need to satisfy the tier C cities, which in this case is Aberdeen, is coming up from Glasgow, but I would connect across to the Central Scotland line so that you can continue to keep Central as the intercity service connection, right? So you do that, go up that way, fine. Not much different really to Scotland. I'd say actually you do retain much as I thought I would say use what they gobbled up with the M90. Actually, I do think you would. I think you would stay on the coast, but you just might do some work to alleviate some of the curvature on the Fife coast. So again, running through there. So that's Scotland, fairly straightforward because Dundee is in there. There's Dundee. Dundee is also a tier C city. Sorry, Dundonians. That sounds mean, doesn't it? Saying that. I don't mean it in an offensive way. Chris Jackson, is there a risk that consolidating all the services onto a handful of routes risks overloading the available capacity, e.g. the junction at Wishaw into Glasgow? Absolutely it does, yes. So this is less, whilst I'm thinking about the operations in terms of stuff like avoiding reversing, this obviously would have massive knock-on impacts on local services, on overall capacity, on resilience, and the fact that you're minimising the number of routes, you're potentially creating a resilience risk. But I suppose the logic is that you would bolster and reinforce, if you like, those routes to manage those capacity challenges. You'd then basically say, you tackle some of those bottlenecks to provide the enhancement and focus the route investment on some of those core routes. In a way, this is a bit like the Beeching 2 report, kind of taking some of that logic to it. Now, our tier C routes, have a look at how little of the East Coast Main Line is being retained, because the East Coast Main Line is a stupid railway if you want to connect up big population centres. Actually, the GNG is a far better route and not that much bendier, actually. So why are we not going via, why on earth aren't we going via Lincoln? Lincoln should be on that route. And yes, you've got stupid level crossings and all sorts of things, but actually having Lincoln in this route as the core north-south means that you get better overall connections to allow you to get from kind of across the city, and puts Lincoln on a north-south intercity route. Okay, so it's a tier C route, so maybe the services aren't as flashing frequent, but then you essentially get that's on the route, and then thankfully we'll have built our Warrington dive under, right? But you can see again we're joining the East Coast Main Line, but we're only on the East Coast Main Line for a bit. Now, some of the gaps, you can see there's some chunky chunks to enable some of these routes, and we're going to go and look at London in a minute. So yes, you go across to Swansea, fine. One of the things that I found irritating was, oh dang, this is where I need my spreadsheet. I presume this is Torquay Torbay? not being on the main route to Plymouth is irritating, because that really would be a. So I was like, I was kind of like, oh, I'm just going to draw a bloody straight line through here, but actually, it is really difficult terrain. So that's that's a thing that continues to irritate me, and that ideally you'd have done some marvelous investment to do that, but chances are you just end up probably having 2 branches there on balance. I didn't say there's any science behind this. But also, you can see here creating this sort of via Bournemouth intercity connection that becomes the priority route, and you can see the mess it's in. But this becomes the priority route between Exeter and London. You'd then go this way via Bournemouth, Southampton, and up to London that way. And you can see this kink very much suggests the need for, actually there should have been a better alternative route built then, strategically. There's a lot of stuff going on around London. And part of that is because of the challenges of picking out things that are and are not distinct from London's built-up area. But also part of it is wanting to create some of these kind of bypassing routes around bits around south of London as well, to enable routes that don't go into central London but connect across. One of the things that I thought of is, rather than what you kind of West Anglian services going out along what is Crossrail's route, actually you'd create a new bit of alignment so that you could connect those services. Also, by the way, a lower Thames crossing for railways. That's the big bit of infrastructure that I think you'd have. So these 2 bits of infrastructure, as well as a new curve here that you'd have built before all the new houses got built, a nice new chord, that would then allow you to run a service of some kind that would run from, south of London over the Thames and then up into East Anglia, avoiding the centre of London. So there's kind of a thing that I thought was an interesting thing of, like, south of London, there's a big gap. It's a big mess of an intercity network. In fact, it's a rubbish intercity network generally. It's a real mess. What else have we got? What other bits are you spotting? What I'm doing is reinventing the ringways, but for rail. You could say that. Yeah. Yes, Torbay did get a mention. But anyway, the East Coast Main Line is probably an interesting one. Telford there only gets a spur, because I was like, oh, can we put it on a thing? But actually, there's not really any railway that then would connect back from Telford to then get you across to Stoke. Crew's off the map. Sorry, Crew. You're off the case. The main route would go through Stoke, not Crew. And in answer to the question of why you would take the route through Wigan, it's because... through this way, it's because you get across to Preston, right? Is that right? No, I'm speaking rubbish. That's not Preston. That's Wigan. You go via Wigan, not Bolton, because you connect through Wigan, so you get that connection of the Tier C cities onto the kind of the existing route, right? Yeah, and you could also then make use of this connection through. Oh, this is a bit that I definitely didn't finish. I was trying to work out how you'd actually go from here down to here, and it's kind of difficult to. But going across from Leeds, putting on the intercity network from Leeds to Blackpool, and then potentially Leeds going this way, not via Manchester, to get up to Glasgow. Yeah, there's a possibility. Anyway, yeah. So, also removal of Leeds Hull direct services, because you'd go Leeds York Hull, and you'd do it that way. And you'd go via the abandoned kind of Market Wheaton line. So the line to Wigan goes through Bolton. Yeah, it does. Pineapple Man 3, you're right. Yeah. I was kind of answering a question that was worded earlier. Does this map resolve West Coast Main Line Sheffield-Manchester conflict at Stockport? No, I don't think it does. Oh, no, you're... Actually... It does, doesn't it? Because your Stockport... Stockport being... Not there. Where am I? Let's get me Stockport. Where's my pyramid? Where's my Stockport pyramid? So Stockport is here, right? Yeah, there's the pyramid. Stockport. There's Stockport. There is Stockport. Yes, it does resolve. I think it does resolve the conflict, because you essentially just have north-south stuff going through there. And you'd use the alternative kind of back route into Manchester to get from Sheffield. So yes is the answer. It does. Bradford. So this is a very good question from Cookie Monster. Because of the statistics I've used, Bradford is part of the West Yorkshire built-up area. I agree that if I was being more statistically rigorous about how I classified these different built-up areas, it would change this map because Bradford would be its own area and it would have a route going through it, which for various eccentric population reasons hasn't happened in other places, where you've got, for example, these three being on their own up here is a bit weird when Bradford's not there. So yes, that's a very good point to pick out, Cookie Monster. Yes.
Bradford.
What else? What other bits and pieces are on here? I can send this KML out to people, by the way, for you to all kind of be confused and puzzled by. Chris Jackson, is the bit that you said is important back on this map? There's a very important east-west connection here that's missing. I mean, this is what east-west rail's kind of doing, isn't it? So we've kind of got east-west rail on here to get across to Cambridge to provide you the kind of connections from Norwich across to the southwest, which is really important. So you kind of get that line. You can see how much of a mess the route is, but you kind of get that connection across. You suspect Bolton would be yellow also, says Uncritical Simon. Yeah, quite possibly. Katie Fan saying Ardwick. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's where the connection is. The route kind of in behind. Yeah. Thanks, Katie. So that's kind of what is that? So there we go. So that's all of that. What have we learned from this nonsense? And we can absolutely go from what you're seeing. Line up your questions. I can drop the KML to everyone. I'll save this as a new KML and I'll drop it into the Discord so you can pick it up. Yes, I have another very good point. Wales is a desert in this one. Well, that's partly so. If I'm taking a purely strategic look at population centres, that's because there are no big population centres anywhere else. If we were putting the connection across to Ireland here, then you would consider that route and it would get mainline status. But in terms of population centres, Wales is not very populated, so it doesn't get that kind of connection. It just goes into South Wales. That's me kind of being fairly dispassionate on that front. David Frankel is saying, were we supposed to learn something? Firstly, the point is that. Well, wait a minute. Let me go to my slides so I can make my last point. What have we learned here? What are our thoughts here? While you link, I'll go big face. What have we learned with this nonsense? So, show the complete map, but without the existing network, showing only a dream network. Oh yeah, good point. I will do that. Let's go small face and let's go back to this and let me get rid of the existing city network. Let me zoom out and show you the whole thing. Actually, can I full screen this thing? Let's go full screen. There's the full map. There it is. Actually, I can just very slightly zoom out. There we are. There's the full map. It's still quite busy. So suddenly you're like once you include the tier C stuff, you're like, oh wait, there's loads of duplication still. But if we get rid of the tiers, so if I now do this and just to sort of tidy things up a bit, if you get rid of the tier C network, you can kind of see this is what I would suggest would be the strategic intercity network. The tier C would then be kind of augmented, and you probably have more mixed type services. But this is what I would then augment as the main network, and the things that you expect to see. You've got the cross country route by and large. You've got Great Western. Much of, obviously the differences on the East Coast Main Line, some of the differences in West Coast Main Line in going through Manchester rather than bypassing around. But the other big change is no East Coast Main Line, is that the Midland Main Line plus Great Central you combine. And I think that's a good example of one of the things I think we learn here, which is if we'd retain, rather than going, we retain the Midland Railway shall be retained, you go, what are all the railways we have, and what would be the best making the best route of the benefits the different companies had, all the different backhanders different companies had given to people to get through different routes, make the best of the different ones through there to get a better railway. And I think that kind of core through the East Midlands is a good example of that, because you're bouncing between whatever that bit is, which I can't remember what. Nerds unite to tell me what that is. This bit, which is the Great Central, and then bits and pieces, good lord, all this stuff that goes here. And I grant you that's messy, but that's because the railways around here are rubbish. And then providing some of that so that for me is a better route for that strategic route. And then you get, by and large, you got the cross country route kind of coming through here. But again, you're tying together. So you're tying together Derby. And Burton on Trent actually is on there, isn't it? Which is surprising. There's all the beer. It's because of all the beer. But yeah, it's actually a tier C city, which is kind of surprising to me, actually. But anyway, there we are. Door hanger, your message is murdering itself. Victoria Amori, Birmingham through services via M6 motorway. Yeah. Yeah, you could just do that, couldn't you? Just like bin off the M6 motorway and just go straight through. So Raphael Nicholas is saying tier A and B main intercity, tier C secondary, something like interregio. Yeah, kind of like that. Yeah, exactly. Michael C. For other connections, looking at the modern network, high-speed rail might make more sense. Oh, 100%. So yeah, don't confuse this with me saying you don't need high-speed rail. The reality is that you'd need to have high-speed rail. At some point, this was partly helping me to think about what I think the pure and perfect high-speed rail network would look like for the UK. Rather than going, right, we've got HS2, let's make the best of it. Me going, right, what would I actually make the high-speed rail network look like in a perfect world? And this was kind of feeding into that, so I was trying to optimize it to actually... And this was kind of a weird output that I was like, this is kind of... Okay, that's why it's a bit scrappy, because it was like a bit of a thought... And I kind of followed it off, scurried off down a little alleyway, kind of going, I wonder what this would tell me. And as it happens, I've no idea what it's told me. Beerton-on-Trent, yeah, exactly. Sakura, also so that Northern Ireland doesn't get forgotten, an Island of Ireland episode with this data. That could be interesting. I do need to do more Ireland stuff, absolutely. Michael C is saying how much of this stuff makes sense to implement nowadays. Definitely lower Thames crossing and lines that like that makes sense. Yeah, there's some stuff to pull out of this of gaps, right? So if we put the tier C stuff on, downwind or downriver of the Thames there's some weird route stuff going on, and I think the lack of a crossing of the Thames down there, as much for freight as anything else, to be honest, is an issue. And some of this ties into freight a little bit as well. One of the things I'm not going to show you is that I'd kind of come up with there are some other things that I'd done. For example, a crossing of the Humber to get through Hull and providing a connection up to Hull, so that would give you some of your kind of Hull connectivity that way rather than this way. But I decided to pull back from that because it was kind of watering down a point I was making about. I was getting too grand visiony, and I wanted to kind of pull back from some of that. But yeah. So anyway, there we are. What was that? What else have I seen? Does mainline status drive population centres growth? Could you strategically place new town cities? Yeah. The other thing would be the new town program could have then built its cities on these, on the tier A or the tier B routes. Or the tier C ones, but yeah, you'd absolutely strategically place those on these routes. Yeah, 100%. Doorhanger 93. I had the same idea with the Midland and GCML and cross country from my own timeline. Nice to know it's just not just me. Yeah, exactly. Jay's Transport. Speak of high speed, do you think NPR will actually be built? I really hope the full line to Leeds gets built. It's so slow right now. Do I think it'll happen? Well, Labour are promising it'll happen, but what that actually ends up meaning precisely, they're in opposition. They can say more than when they have to face the Treasury vampires. I'd love it to be built properly because the current post-IRP proposals are a bodge at best, and they're a dog's dinner, to be honest. Raphael Nicolaus, what would the regular top-speed service for the intercity network look like? Well, you'd be aiming for 125, so a 200 kilometer an hour network. For certainly for the tier A, tier B stuff, you'd be aiming to iron out as many kinks as possible to get close to that. In 1950, you'd be aiming for 100. And then, that would then continue to, in a staggered way, you then do as much speed increasing as you can and iron out the kinks where they're not near, where you can, where they're kind of away from stations and trains ideally would be going faster. Chris Jackson, another interesting idea for future NATO would be designing some dedicated freight corridors. So, very good point. Have I put it in, where have I put it? Yes. One of the things I'm going to put on tier B, this is not very clear. Oh, you know what? I'll put it in white. So if I just do share style and make this 20 and make it white. So these are freight receptors, and you can see they're showing up really weirdly. I don't know why they are, but they are here. Weirdly, they're coloring themselves in blue, which is a bit strange as well. So I did my tier C routes a little bit. Were paying attention to freight. But you're right. It'd be interesting to overlay a strategic freight network over the top of this. I'm in the process of trying to work out a way to not do all the legwork of digitizing a freight database myself. So, but Chris Jackson is a very interesting point. Yes, and I have thought about that, and it'd be an interesting one to explore. Get like Nick from Intermodality on, Nick Gallup on to talk about it or something like that. Just partly because I'm using Nick's data to try and kind of geolocate some of that data and think about what a network would look like. But yeah, very, very, very good point, Chris. That'd be really interesting, I think, to think about that, to look at that. So, what other queries have we got? Let's see. What does the South Devon mainline do to mitigate Dawlish seawall? Very good point, Thomas Gray. I have a nasty suspicion I didn't actually do anything, which you could argue I needed to, but I don't think the northern route would be where I would take a main line. You do need to, you don't, because reversing is messy, and so I think what you would do would be, it's not down there, what am I about? Oh no, it's down there, yeah, there we are. So there's Exeter and there's Plymouth. What I would do, what I think I'd be doing is cutting a kind of an inland route that kind of cut the corner off, and left this as then a kind of left the coastal route as for local services. I think that's probably what I'd do, but I haven't done it here because it's a new thing. I should have done it, shouldn't I? That should have been one of my thick yellows to kind of dodge that. You're right. But I think I just did thick yellow bits, new bits where there was a fundamentally missing connection rather than, so there are lots of things that I'd sort. South Devon coast bit is one. There are loads of kinks and corners that I'd tidy up. Morpeth curve and all sorts of things that need to be tidied up. Any ideas on how you'd enlarge King's Cross St Pancras to take a huge influx of trains under these plans? A bit like the combination. There were plans to merge the two stations in various ways throughout history. So I don't have any particular fixed ideas, but you'd have not all, but some of it would be through platforms to then connect onto the Channel Tunnel. The GWR powers for the inland Dawlish avoider were not surrendered until the 1960s. What could have been? What could have been, everyone? Anyway, so those be my thoughts. I'm going to continue chucking thoughts and questions at me, but I'm going to press on with this and get rid of my face and do the outro. So, audio only format. Thanks for those listening. Hello to everyone listening in audio only format. This episode and all the others are going to be lined up. All the other Pat Leave pre-records are going to be lined up for you to listen to. So you'll actually have on-time podcast releases, which will be fun. Patreon.com/Gareth Dennis for supporting me on Patreon. Thanks to everyone who supports me on Patreon. For anyone who doesn't know, there's a new Patreon exclusive video just went up where some stuff gets discussed. So if you aren't a Patreon person, you want to see that, subscribe. You get to watch it. There are some bonus elements to being a Patreon supporter other than just that warm fuzzy feeling that you're helping me to do more of this not fun thoughtful nonsense. PayPal.me/Gareth Dennis to if you don't fancy a long-term subscription, but you were kind of like, oh, you know what, I enjoyed that, and I want to, but I hate Gareth and I wanted to send him abuse, so I'm going to give him £1, but tell him he's a prat. You can do that. PayPal.me/Gareth Dennis. You have the technology to do that at your disposal. GarethDennis.co.uk/Discord, where all of this chat and more besides goes on. Hello, lovely people in the chat. You're wonderful. That continues in the Discord server. It's a wonderful community of people. Lots of fun, nerdy stuff goes back and forth. Not too many in-jokes, although a fair number of in-jokes. But it's a reasonably accessible place. Go in there, ask your questions, have thoughts, look at maps. I'll put the KML file in there for you to play with. All good fun stuff for you to do in there. Right, so the fun thoughts of what are the next few weeks holding for you, because of course, I will be disappearing on paternity leave to help my wonderful darling wife to raise a little baby for longer than a month. I'm not just going to give up after a month, but I'm taking a month of pat leave, right? I will not be doing Rail Natters live during that period of time. Rightly so. You will be receiving multiple pre-record episodes to watch. Episode 153, High Speed 2. We're going to High Speed 2. We're going to Long Itchington Wood Tunnel, and we're going to look inside a ruddy tunnel boring machine, and it's so cool. I cannot express the extent to which this was a cool thing, and I hope I have captured that energy and excitement. and by giving you a long form tour of the inside of a TBM. Jeff did a video which was great, but obviously Jeff does short videos because he cares about things like actually creating an engaging video. I just kind of fancy taking you all out with me on a bit of a plod in real time. Hence why this video it's not too long, but it's still like 40, 50 minutes, whatever it is, an hour. Might be an hour. I can't remember. They're rail natter length. Anyway, so that's that. That's 153. As ever with a chunk of pre-record, I should tell you the next episode too. You're going to get advance warning because these are all on YouTube anyway now. Episode 154, lined up for premieres. They're not watchable on YouTube. Episode 154, An Odyssey of Historical Curiosity with Bob Gwynn. Bob and I, brilliant Bob, we sit down and we have a lengthy chat about all sorts of historical stuff, and it was brilliant. And I did it, recorded it in one hit, put it up pretty much as it is. It's just for you to enjoy. It's delightful. I really enjoyed it. One for you all to soak in. Episode 155, I also recorded it yesterday evening with Luke Agbimony. Perfection and Imperfection on the Underground. Luke's second Tube Mapper project book is out, and we go on a visual odyssey. I'm using the word odyssey a lot at the moment. A visual adventure through London's various transport systems and look at the aesthetic sublime of those systems. It's a lovely episode. Luke's lovely. We had a lovely time. We get all artistic because I think that's actually a really important part of public services and systems and transport. So we talk about that. It's great fun. There will be other pre-record episodes besides these. There will be at least one more. Oh, in fact. Oh, yeah, wait. There's another one. Have I not made the thumbnail for this one yet? Huh. Wait a minute. Hold that thought. I'm going to go big face while it's me. Where have I put... I thought I'd created the thumbnail for that. Thumbs. Yeah, I forgot to put this in. Right, good. Let me put the... I forgot one, everyone. There's another one, everyone. Right, here we are. It's in. It's done. Good. Back to no face again. Professional as ever. Oh my goodness. Episode 156. We have a long chat with... we have a nice chat with Charlotte Kingston of the National Rail Museum. We talk about what the hell is happening there. What's going on? Many things. What's happening? Let's talk about it. So we do. I do a bit of a tour of the innovation platform. I look at Class 84 and make excited, happy noises. Oh, and it's good. And after this, there'll be another episode, which... will be with someone who's watching the episode right now. Ooh, that's exciting. So, for those of you saying happy birthday, thank you. Yes, it is my birthday. You've enjoyed a live rail natter on my birthday. So thanks for that. You've also got me looking like a guy from Boston, with my white shirt, white t-shirt, blue shirt combo. I look like I'm going for blue collar worker look, right? Except I'm not carrying it off. Anyway, right. You lovely lot. What an evening. Thanks for joining me this evening. I'm going to run away now because this episode's gone a bit long. I will see you all in over a month. Oh. I will... Yeah, Penblwydd Hapus. Diolch yn fawr. I will see... thanks Mrs. Bifflechips as well. Oh, very kind. Thanks, everyone. All you lovely people wish me happy birthday. Marvellous. Babies do indeed change your life. Yes, that's the general idea, I hope. I will see... I have to leave the chat now because you're all... I don't think... Did I miss any good questions? Let me whiz back up. Plans for the GWR to build Dawlish Avoid back 1939. Yeah, I'll cover that. Cheers based to populations. One thing, what about existing traffic flows? Yeah, it's an interesting potential thing, but I'm less of a fan of existing traffic flows because those are kind of influenced by good road transport or rubbish public transport, whereas looking at populations is like the opportunity to create journeys that don't necessarily currently exist. And I think we need to do more of that rather than less, more thinking about potential journeys and less thinking about how do we add 2% to existing journeys. Will there be a use in the Edinburgh Suburban being kept as one of those urban rings like in the Tier A cities? No, none at all. Because Edinburgh doesn't kind of need to have that type of a service because nothing goes through Edinburgh from the east, nothing goes through Edinburgh from the west, so you don't need it. Right. Good questions. That was fun. That was chaos. I don't know what we learned. We didn't learn anything, but it was some fun. It was classic rail natter nonsense. I'm going to wave you all farewell. Everyone, just a pleasure. Oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go in Oh, you know what? Stuff it. You're going to see my mouse when I set up the end here. Cheerio, everyone. Cheerio.